Awesome. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Master Your Mental podcast. As you guys can see from the title of today's episode, Forgiving Yourself, we are going to be getting into what this means and what the role of forgiveness plays in relation to mental health. Joining me with tips on this topic is my wonderful guest, Kelli Calabrese. Kelli is a 34-year fitness, nutrition, wellness, and lifestyle coach. She is a 3-time best-selling author, international speaker, and was an executive with a global nutrition company and certified divorce coach. I'm so excited to speak on this topic with Kelli. So without further ado, welcome Kelli to the podcast.
Harris, thanks so much for having me. This is fun.
Of course. I'm so excited to have you here today and get into this topic because this is something that I have not talked about, forgiveness. And I was like, she is the perfect person for this. Like just reading over all the stuff that you've done and all the things that you're into, I was like, we need to have this conversation. So I'm so excited. So before we dive in, just tell us some more about who you are and what lights you up.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I knew really early on that I wanted to be into fitness and health and wellness and nutrition. Literally, when I was 13, I wrote in my diary, I will be an exercise therapist. And that came out of the desire to move away from pain, which was a really strong family history of heart disease, diabetes, obesity, stroke, cancer, alcoholism, cigarette smoking. And I was like, oh, I don't want anything to do with that. But I was also really happy when I was running, dancing, jumping, swimming, cheerleading. Like I just love that endorphin rush. I'm like, what do people not get about this? Like I want everyone to feel this like natural, amazing high. And so I went on this journey. I got certified by the time I was 17. I got 3 college degrees. And for the first 14 years of my career, I owned and operated health clubs. I managed corporate fitness centers. I founded a school to prepare people to be clinical exercise specialists and personal trainers. And then my son was born. So that was kind of the next turning point. And my daughter was born right away. They're now 20 and 21. But I came home and I still really wanted to contribute to my industry on a high level. So I started writing, speaking, consulting, editing, spokesperson, media work, fitness boot camps, network marketing, anything that I could do to help people be well. And, it's just been a great 34-year journey as a health coach. And I've just been blessed to be on world-class stages and speak on all the, just the networks and write books. And so there's been a lot of different vehicles and ways to help people be well.
Oh my goodness. That is incredible. That's amazing. Cause I feel like when we talk about health, especially that connection that our physical health has to our mental health and how the two of them influence each other and can impact one another. And I love how you got into the industry because you saw this happening within your own family with all these issues related to health and things like that. And you did not want that to continue. You wanted to work towards solutions and coming up with how to help these things and make things better. So I think that's amazing and so important. And, I wish that more people were so much more into this because it really does bring so much value. Like once you start to treat your body right and really treat with kindness, instead of neglecting it or not really knowing what to do, it just makes such a difference in so many areas of your life. And I'm pretty sure that you know all about that. So I'd love to ask you too, why do you think we're talking about this topic of forgiving yourself? And you can relate this to so many areas. Like when you talk about health, like forgiving yourself for not getting to the gym or not taking care of your body. Why do you think that some people struggle so much with this aspect of forgiving themselves?
That is a great question. I grew up Catholic, kind of traditional. Obviously, people have all different kind of beliefs about, religion and God or not. But I had heard about forgiveness like a lot of us do. Growing up, it may or may not have been modeled for you. Like you may have heard apologize to your brother, and that was your example of forgiveness. Or tell someone you're sorry. And so I didn't really have any great examples of this in my life. My parents are amazing. I love them. They loved me. It wasn't like I was in this abusive situation, but I had a turning point in my life that really required me to understand forgiveness, or I was just going to live in bitterness and sadness and disappointment and rejection. And I just got to a point where I'm like, okay, I have got to figure this out. Because think of the people that you know that something has happened in their world where things didn't match up, it didn't go the way they thought, and they get stuck
Hmm.
somewhere really bad. Like, you know, when they walk in the room, you feel like that victim energy or that anger or whatever it is. There's something, right? We're going to malfunction in some way. So I went on this 3-year journey when my husband of 25 years came home and he said, my commitment to our marriage is zero. And he left. And it
Wow.
rocked my world. I mean, it emptied me out. It took me to my knees. I really had no reference for this. There was no divorce in my family. So, on this journey to get well, forgiveness was one of the biggest pieces. And you'll be surprised maybe to hear that it wasn't so much in forgiving my now ex husband. Because if you heard my story, you would go, well, you shouldn't have had to forgive him. That wasn't really fair. Or what he did wasn't just, or whatever. But it was forgiving myself. So getting to the point where sometimes we are holding our own feet to the fire, like we are burning ourselves literally because we don't want to forgive ourselves for whatever, whether it was you did screw up, you did make a mistake, you did miss it, or maybe you just feel like a failure and you're not forgiving yourself. So there's so many different things that these conversations go on in our mind that we sort of self punish, could be one thing. So if we're talking about self forgiveness, it's that um, we're just rejecting ourselves, and it then becomes dysfunctional in our thinking. So there's so many different directions we can go with this, but I'll stop there because I went for a little bit. I may have said
Yeah, no, and you completely answered that question because I was wondering, like, when you said that you had this moment in your life that really, altered, the this forgiveness. So was that moment for you, was it the divorce being like sprung on you, or like what was that moment that made you think like I really need to forgive myself for, going through this and dealing with this and to get out of the other side?
well, I started thinking that it was my ex-husband that I needed to forgive. So frozen. Okay, there we go. We were frozen for a second.
I know.
Yeah, I started thinking it was my ex that I needed to forgive. So I started to study forgiveness because I had said the words like I forgive him, but then there'd be like one text message and I'd be like, ugh, like there'd be one conversation or one thing, and I'd be like, ugh, and like I just knew that I said the words I forgive him, but there was
Mhm.
still like this, oh, that was still in there. So I'm like, all right, you really need to figure this out. So I started to study forgiveness. And in that process, I can say that I forgave him, but it was myself that was the hardest part. And for me, my personal thing was I did feel like a failure. Like my marriage should not have failed. I did, the right things, and I was a good, loyal wife, and I valued my family. And so it was seeing myself as a failure was the part that I had to really forgive. So it took a lot of peeling back the layers, and you just have to sit with it sometimes. It can happen in a moment where you say, okay, I forgive myself. But then the next time something hard happens or something stressful happens, and you're back in that same cycle of whatever it is, if it's anger or enabling or passive aggression, or like I just felt like I needed to fix this permanently, and forgiveness was one of the answers. There were several, but that was like the last piece that I really had to peel back.
Wow. And just hearing you say that, it makes me think of what you just said there. Like it almost seems like it's easier to forgive others than it is to forgive ourselves. And like you said, finally noticing, being able to forgive him and then having these moments come back up where, you're having these feelings, like these emotions happening again. But then when it comes to you, I would love to ask you too, like what did you have like a strategy, or like what steps did you take to be able to work towards forgiving yourself? Because, if you struggle so much with that, because I can relate to that as well, with forgiving yourself for something and then internalizing that and really taking that as you're a failure and not, like the external things, right? Like this relationship what was a failure. No, me. It's you take it as you are that. And that seems very, very difficult to come out of when you take it that way instead of, this thing didn't work out. And then it's easier to forgive, over time. But then when it's you, it's like, oh, like how do you get that? So what was the most helpful for you in your journey of forgiving yourself? Like, did you do certain things? What did it look like?
Yeah, great question. So you really do need to hold up the mirror because you have to look at yourself. So it was never 100% my ex-husband and 0% me. So you have to really own, well, what was my part in it? And, then understanding what people's needs are in a relationship and how maybe I wasn't meeting that need. Even if he wasn't meeting my need, this is about me. So forgiveness is really about yourself. And I believe in God, if your listeners do or don't, some hopefully higher power, like that's between the two of you. That's where the forgiveness really comes from. But it was really just like laying it all out there, being honest with yourself, looking in the mirror and just saying, I forgive myself. I'm not perfect, but I was a perfectionist. So I needed to really forgive it. And then you're releasing it when you forgive it. You're letting it go. You're going, that's it. Like I'm not looking back. It's in my rearview mirror. I'm not going to keep retelling that story over and over and over. I'm going to create a new story because that's in the past. And obviously, you don't want to keep repeating it over and over and over again. But I looked at, well, what are my options? If I don't forgive myself, I'm going to keep burying this down. I'm going to just keep, repeating this same tragedy over and over and over again. I'm going to take it into the next relationship. So it was like, you have to do this. Otherwise, you're going to just keep repeating the same cycle. So it was really just sitting down and looking in the mirror and saying that I forgive myself and I'm just casting it out there. Doesn't mean I won't make mistakes again, doesn't mean I might not repeat something again, but just really releasing it, not holding on to it. And just, my way is just give it to God. Like, okay, that's it. I'm done. There's a higher power than me, and I'm just turning it over.
Wow, that's amazing because when you sit there and think about that, if you hadn't done that, what would your life look like if you hadn't been able to forgive yourself? And like you just said right there, you would carry that over into other relationships and it would keep coming back as a cycle, like you said, continuing to like repeat these thoughts and patterns and not being able to break it. So that is amazing that you were able to do that, because I know there's probably so many people out there, and listening to this right now who might be struggling with that in some aspect of, forgiving themselves for something having gone wrong, or, whether a relationship or a job or some kind of opportunity or something in their life that didn't work out, the way that they wanted it to, or the way that they saw it. And then they see it as a failure. And then they take it as, no, I'm the failure because this didn't work. You did everything in your power. And like you said, this shouldn't have gone the way it did, but it did. And that's such a beautiful message that you just put right there, of being able to look in the mirror, look at yourself and forgive yourself and say, take responsibility for that. And that's what I think is so powerful, is just, that healing journey of being able to do that yourself, and the fact that no one else can do it for us, and no matter how much we wish or try, or, all the support we have around us, it has to come from inside of us, to have that moment where, you can work towards breaking that pattern. I think that's amazing that the way you outlined it, and just, reference that to the past, right? Of always going back to the past and, trying to like replay scenarios in your head of what if this went this way, or like these what ifs, or these questions that pop up and all this stuff. And when you really think about it, it doesn't do any good for you. It doesn't do any good for you now or moving forward into the future. So I love the way that you laid that out. And that's such an awesome tip of, avoiding going back to the past and, working on what you have now and what you can control now and what you have in your life now that is amazing. So, on that note, I'd love to ask you, like, if you could go back in time and give your 20-year-old self one piece of advice on this topic of self-forgiveness, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say, well, I'll bring this into it, but I would say apologize to yourself often because you're not perfect. And so don't be afraid to say, you know what, I'm sorry for thinking, that you had to be perfect, or I'm sorry for you thinking that you had to, show up this way or whatever it is. So just like you would apologize to someone else, apologize to yourself. Whether it's I got drunk last night, I didn't mean to do that, or So practice patience with yourself, practice humility with yourself. Just create this whole atmosphere of forgiveness, because what you're creating on the inside is what shows up outside. And that ripples out to your family, your friends, your work, everything else. So when you carry forgiveness, you're really carrying peace with you. And so that becomes your life, it becomes your lifestyle, and it's just a great place to live in peace. So I would put an end to, these ugly cycles of whatever it looks like for you. Everyone is going to do something to help their struggle or their pain in life, and I want them to do something healthy. So if you watch, some people are going to isolate, some people are going to get angry, some people are going to, turn to abusive things, some people are going to try and escape. I mean, we're all going to do something to try and, manage pain and to be loved, because that's what we all really want. So we just want people to do healthy things, and forgiveness is a tool that really helps, because if you don't forgive, look what happens. You're burying things. You want to minimize your behavior or someone else's behavior. You start to rationalize things that really are not excellent because you don't want to, forgive it or face it. You might start compromising in your life because you're holding all this unforgiveness in. You blame people, you'll punish yourself. I mean, it just gets really, really ugly, where people are not living a life of forgiveness. They're going to keep doing something. They're going to lie, to just be able to function when they're carrying all this bitterness, anger, resentment, unforgiveness, unmet expectations inside of them. And I just didn't want to do that. So you've probably heard that, the truth will set you free. So when you face it and hold up the mirror and really be true to yourself, there is a freedom and a peace that comes with that.
Wow. I love how you brought up those aspects of patience and humility, and how you talked about, aspect of forgiveness, instead of going to things like escaping or running away or doing all these things that we do that sometimes we don't even have awareness of, right? And when you're in that moment, it almost does seem easier to stay in that place, because it can be scary to make those changes and, do those things that really prioritize yourself and your mental health. Because like you said, I think you brought up a little bit of like people pleasing a little bit, and having these aspects of wanting to put others first, and in doing that, neglecting yourself, and really not knowing how to forgive yourself. So when you brought up that having patience and practicing that often, and giving that gift to yourself, I think that's amazing, because that is something that I can tell you has definitely made a difference in my life, and I know in yours as well, of being able to do that instead of these things that we used to do that we thought were helping, but like you said, was just adding more problems to the list, of minimizing behaviors, or running away from situations, or compromising, or all these things that continue to stack up on this list, and just gets worse, and it's almost like this never ending cycle, and you just feel like, oh, like, how do I get out of it? Like, what do I do? And when you can give yourself that gift of saying, I'm sorry, I love you, I forgive you, and to do that to yourself, and like start to do that regularly, instead of always going to, more of like a negative place, right? With like negative self-talk, like this is my fault, or, I did this wrong, or I should have seen this coming, or all these things that we tend to tell ourselves sometimes. When we can start to do that, that makes a huge difference. And I think that that's amazing advice, because I wish that I had that when I was 20 or even younger. I wish that's amazing to be able to do that, to give yourself that, of forgiving yourself and practicing that, and really holding that as something that you do for yourself, because it can be hard, when you live so much of your life not doing that, or not knowing how to do that. So, I mean, I would also love to ask you, like, what differences have you seen in your life since being able to forgive yourself? Like, how has it been different from how it used to be to how it is now?
Oh, it's been amazing. I mean, Forgiveness is so powerful, just like unforgiveness is. And so when you live in forgiveness and you're modeling that and you say to someone, I'm sorry, please forgive me, now it takes the power away from them being angry at you. And it's their choice if they still want to be angry at you, but your part is done. Like you've released it when you forgive it. So I decided to live a life, a pre decided life of forgiveness. So, what that now means is I pre decide not to be critical. I pre decide not to judge. I pre decide not to be a victim. I pre decide not to let politics or medicine or anything really affect my day-to-day life. I pre-decide that I'm going to create a win. So I live this life where I decide ahead of time that my peace is really expensive and I don't want to give it up. It's just not worth it for me to lose my peace. So it's just way easier to live this pre-decided life. And the highest level of forgiveness is to forgive someone in the area where they hurt you. So, for example, with my ex husband, he was re engaged within a month of our divorce and he was
Wow.
remarried a few months later. And so I can say from the bottom of my heart with complete, absolute honesty that I forgive him and I bless him and his new wife. I want nothing but the best for them. I hope they're together forever. They complete each other till death do they part. I don't harbor any ill feelings against him at all. I don't necessarily want to sit across from him at the dinner table, but I don't have an ill feeling towards him whatsoever. So that's the highest level of forgiveness, where you can live a life where you forgive people in the area where they hurt you. Because what I discovered is hurt people, and they'll usually hurt people in the area where they're hurt. So the people who bully were bullied. The people who, have an affair, they probably had a history of that, generationally in their family. So people, their thoughts become their words become their actions become their habits, and their habits become their identity. Or you can change your identity, you can definitely change what that is, but people just like build this track in their mind and it replays over and over and over and over. So it's who they become. They can decide to be something different. But that's really how it's changed for me. I live a pre decided life of forgiveness and peace.
Wow. That's so amazing. And that to me, hearing you talk about all of that, what word comes up to me is just freedom. Freedom, freeing yourself, because I feel like when you really think about it, if you think back to if you weren't able to forgive your ex-husband, what would your life look like? Still like what would see like when you think about that, isn't it just so wild to be like, wow, like to do that. And I know, that's such a beautiful thing because I agree with everything you're saying, especially when you talked about pre-deciding to have kindness for yourself and to practice patience and to not go to over analyzing things, which can be really difficult sometimes. I think that's amazing because I can tell you, like, just from hearing you say that, that sounds like just having that of being able to forgive and knowing that you're feeling free, that you're not carrying these things inside of you, that because they, like you said, if you let them sit and you continue to have these feelings towards this person or this event or whatever it was that really, really hurt you and impacted you in a way that you feel you can't move forward from, that damage stays. And like you said, when someone's hurt people, and they usually hurt them in the same way that they were hurt. And that's such a amazing realization that you just brought up because when you really think about this gift of forgiveness and being able to forgive yourself and forgiving others and being able to reach that point, which isn't necessarily, like you snap your fingers and you're like, I'm good, I forgave them and everything's great and I'm happy. Of course, like you said, it's a journey. It's a journey and it doesn't just happen boom, just like that. It has to take, you got to take the steps and you got to pour into yourself. And, a lot of that comes from, self-love and having that, like those aspects you mentioned of patience and humility and being able to, honor yourself in those moments and not be so hard and continue to beat yourself down when you're already down. continuing to like hammer into yourself of, all these things and go back to the past, like you said, like you highlighted, going back to those moments and trying to like, rethink things. And all that does, like you said, is cause more pain and more damage and more hurt. And when we can move past that and forgive that and say, I wish this person well. I really, really do. And I really want, and that for you is just, it frees you. It's like, boom. It's like now you're able to go back to living your life for you instead of always worrying about, these other people or these situations. And I think that's so amazing and so powerful. And wow, like I just think that's incredible. And honestly, like the one question I really want to ask you is I always ask this to everybody because I always love seeing the answers that people have because everyone always has the best answers to this. So I'd love to ask you, what are you currently doing right now in this moment to master your mental?
That is a great question. Well, the lens that I use to look through life is to let love win. That's always the barometer that I want to use when I make any choices, any decisions, any thinking. And so my day really is open and revolving around how can I let love win in everything that I do. So the divorce coaching that I do with women, how can I get them to get that boldness back? So in the life coaching that I do, anytime I'm coaching someone, I'm always growing, I'm always learning at the same time. It makes me a better person, a better coach. So I am helping as many women as I possibly can go from grief to great and then even better, like helping people create this amazing bonus life that they never even knew was possible before, because they had something happen in their life, like a divorce that they weren't expecting. It just helps me grow and gives me life. And I'm a knowledge person, so I'm always learning. I'm always looking for ways to better help myself and to help my clients. So when I went on this 3-year sabbatical healing journey, I was, listening to the podcast, going to the summits. I went on the retreats. I was in, prayer groups and Bible studies and divorce recovery. And so I am a chronic learner. I spend about 4 hours a day, reading and listening to wise people. So it's all to use to help myself, which helps other people.
Wow, that's amazing. Kelly, you are so great. I'm so happy we got to have this conversation because you brought so many great tips to the table on this topic of forgiveness and loving yourself and moving past such painful experiences and things that have been really difficult and almost impossible to overcome in life that it feels like. So honestly, like that's amazing. I love that. I love that you say chronic learner. That's that's so cool that you have that passion and that drive to always continue to fill your cup to be able to fill others and to pour into others. So I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing a little bit of your story and your journey and your tips with everybody. It was so great chatting with you and just diving into this topic and being able to explore this a little bit more on how to practice forgiveness and how to really get through these moments and what does that look like when you're able to do that and what does it look like when you're not, so thank you so much for coming on here. You're awesome and I love this conversation. Can't wait to put it out. And yeah, so thanks so much for coming out.
Thanks, Paris. I'm happy to do it. Thanks for bringing the show to the world. The world needs it. Master mental.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day. And everyone listening, you guys, whether you're listening during the daytime or the nighttime, hope that you guys all have a good one. And I'm going to end it on this note and say bye to you guys and bye to Kelly. So bye, Kelly.